አመሰግናለሁ። Welcome, Temi, Celestine, and Hannah. We wanted to use this 20 minutes to get a broader idea of, what ESX looks like from the perspective of other African exchanges. I'll throw in first question in Amharic to Hannah, then I'll come to you. Hannah, Ethiopia Capital Gabaya Sra'at.
The establishment of the Ethiopian capital market system, along with the Ethiopian Capital Market Authority and the exchange, required a span of 3 years. What were our primary objectives during this period, and what are the forthcoming steps, particularly for the regulatory bodies? Let us begin with this.
ምንድናቸው? በሱ ብንጀምር።
ጥላሁን አመሰግናለሁ። እዚህ የተገኛችሁትን ሁላችሁን እንኳን ደስ ያላችሁ ለማለት ወዳለሁ በጣም
Thank you, Tilahun. I'd like to congratulate all of you who are here. Thank you very much for the question, too. As you mentioned earlier, we have reached to this point today after exploiting the efforts exerted by the several individuals before us, government's directions, the 2 documents of Ethiopia's homegrown agenda as well as the board economic reform measures. But as you have just mentioned earlier, there have been activities similar to the capital market in the past several years. However, after the capital market was established by Decree number 1248, the biggest priority was the perception of a clear legal framework to guide and regulate the capital market. The biggest priority was the preparation of a clear legal framework to guide and regulate the capital market. Of course, the first element of the legal framework is Proclamation number 1248, for it is so important it is introduced the institution that allow us to say the capital market is truly new and has just begun. This proclamation introduced the Ethiopian Capital Market Authority, the Ethiopian Securities Exchange, the CSD, now the National Bank, and other important market intermediaries, as well as all the linking institutions that connect the market. Not only that, the decree also introduced technology. As you know, before this, the market operated manually, with investments being exchanged directly between investors and the exchange. However, the proclamation identified this gap in the market and introduced technology among other advancements. Subsequent to the enactment of the bill, there were directives issued by the authority. These directives aim at protecting investors as they had previously encountered difficulties in the prior system, superficially resembling a capital market, particularly due to a scenario in which numerous individuals placed their trust in institutions but did not receive the anticipated returns on their investment. One contributing factor to this issue was the absence of regulatory authority. Additionally, there was a lack of a legal framework that obliges issuers or securities exchange operators to provide adequate and high-quality information, which is essential for investors to make informed investment decisions. We have prioritized the development of legal frameworks with a primary focus on investors' protection. We have prioritized the development of legal frameworks with a primary focus on investor protection. While the bill outlines 4 main objectives for the Capital Market Authority, that encompasses market establishing, safeguarding the market from systemic risks, and investors' protection, our foremost emphasis remains on enhancing investor protection, particularly to address the challenges encountered in the past. We have also been focusing on enhancing market infrastructure. Our efforts are directed towards establishing frameworks that support licensing, regulation, and supervision aimed at facilitating institutions and technologies that promote market efficiency. In this context, the Ethiopian Securities Exchange is one of these institutions. Additionally, we have recently implemented directives for the exchange of OTC and derivative markets. So we have been working on building market infrastructure. At the Capital Market Authority, we have placed significant importance on public awareness. Financial inclusions, as you previously noted, aligns with the government's objectives. To realize this goal, raising public awareness is essential. Over the past 3 years, we have conducted a variety of educational initiatives targeting market participants, potential capital market service provider institutions, schools, and individuals. These were our focus areas.
ለዚህ እነዚህ ከሞላ ጎደል ፕራዮሪቲዎች ነበሩና ስንሰራባቸው የቆየናቸው ናቸው።
አመሰግናለሁ። ስለ ቪዥኑ ተመልሼ እመጣለሁ። Celestine, as a president of the African Stock Exchanges Association, I'm sure you had the opportunity to explore and visit many of the exchanges, around 29, 28 exchanges. What can ESX learn from the successes, but also the failures of others? Wiseman's perhaps recommendation on our challenges, if possible. Thanks.
Thank you very much, CEO. Thank you for having us. I would say you are already successful for having these many people seated here, talking about 90 listings, talking about already a regulatory framework. Some of us started without a regulatory framework at all. A blueprint, you create rules of the game, and you are ready to go. So, looking at things that have happened across the continent, we have all developed small markets, except for a few countries, but it's a necessity. There is no successful economy that I know of on this planet which does not have a capital market. So that's number one. So all of them have followed best practice internationally. Everyone knows best practice because it's dictated from somewhere. It's in the books. It has been done before. So the most important aspect when you are starting to develop from the experiences we've seen, was that most of the markets that have made it well, they have learned from somewhere else, but applying local realities most of the time. So you will learn from your neighbors, you see what they do best, but you apply it to your own local markets. Because sometimes we make regulations and rules that are a bit stringent, yet our markets are not ready for that. Our capital markets professionals are not many, and our people are not saving enough. So you need to do a whole lot of education, public education that needs to be done so that people can know what to do and how to go about it. So maybe the lesson I think we can learn from the other exchanges that have been more successful. The first one is to work together as regulators. You know, because you are the pioneers, and then you lean on each other all the time, and in sync, because you have the same common objective is to develop the capital market of the country. So if you work together, you have the necessary resources to do that. I think you would get far. Second, stick to the realities on the ground. Understand your businesses, because sometimes we tend to preempt what businesses are going to do. All they are looking for is capital and a little bit of education on how to deploy that capital in the best way possible to protect investors. If they are educated very well, you have the right framework and technology, you are not worried about it. You are already hitting the ground running, so you have one of the best technologies I can see. So I think you can make it. The last thing I have learned across markets, because on the whole continent we all have the similar issues, except a few markets again. The most advanced one, maybe let's say South Africa, maybe to a certain extent Nigeria, and the bigger markets. We have similar realities in our markets. The first one is liquidity. There is not enough liquidity. The liquidity is not there because there is not enough products. That means securities to be traded. The third one is the savings level, which are not there. Again, people are not used to saving through the markets. So liquidity can be addressed for what I have seen. Some countries have policies on privatization. You must make sure that while you are still on fashion, you get promises from government to give you state-owned companies when they want to privatize them to go through the market. At the end of the day, these assets are taxpayers' assets. If you manage to get that, you will be okay. Second, what I've seen happening in some markets is policies that look around public utility companies. Public utility companies means what? Telcos, utility companies, banks, insurance companies, mining companies, transport, and certain companies of certain size, because those are the bulk of what happens in our economies. And they are all given licenses, I like to call them to kill, because they are given licenses that are public in nature. Even if they are not public, they are not publicly owned. They are owned maybe by a few individuals here and there. So those are making the bulk of the economy, and wider ownership would make the market grow in that way. And then the last one would be the demand side. You know, the institutional investors, if they support the market domestically, you do not even need money from outside that economy necessarily. So I think those three, if they are combined, that was one of the best lessons I learned. Lastly, try not to fragment your market. You see, Ethiopia is one of the biggest economies on the continent, but by international standards, it's still a small economy. So now, if you have a capital market, you start fragmenting it, you will never deepen it, you will never be able to develop it properly. So most of our markets have one exchange. There are some who have more, but there is nothing wrong having competition, but be careful in the beginning when you are developing so that you are able to consolidate what you are doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Temi, it's an honor to have, obviously, NGX Group as one of the strategic investors on ESX. We also have something in common. The Dangote Group is both an important establishment in Nigeria. They're also into cement manufacturing in Ethiopia. And you have a lot of audience, including many that are in the private sector that are, considering what is the importance of listing. Why is listing important? Why do companies come to the public market?
Thank you very much. Let me add maybe my own thanks and appreciation for being able to be here this afternoon. We are an extremely happy shareholder in ESX. First and foremost, of course, from a continent perspective, this subject of integration that has been spoken about, we thought that we could take a leadership in that perspective from a capital market perspective. But more importantly, when I look at ESX, and I want to speak to this before I address the question, specifically to add some of the things that have just been said, I'm very happy with some of the things that I see, and I want to just stress. One, when people say that if you come late, maybe to an event or a party, there are certain things you can learn and leapfrog. And when I look at, for example, what I saw on the screen, if you look at the three markets that you spoke to, for example, your equities, your fixed income, and the alternative, a country like ours that's maybe about 62 years old now as a capital market spent maybe 40 years first in the equities market, if I should say 50 years first. And then we spend the last maybe 12 years in fixed income and just now trying to get into alternative securities. And to have this ability to start afresh with all three, I think is very, very, very material. Number two, I look at just the involvement of government in what you are doing. It's absolutely critical. When I sat beside Hannah this afternoon, I was like, well, let me make a request, please. Let the exchange live and breathe, to see this hand-holding together. Because a lot of exchanges, what you find is this breakdown between the wonderful ideas of the private sector, the exchange, versus the government, whether on the regulation side, or the government perhaps, on the policy side, that's not really aligned. And you go round and round in circles. And to see that here, really, I just want to just say how wonderful I think a thing that is. And then finally, back to the question that you had asked, just to see in the audience, private sector, to see government, extremely critical. Why are listings important? Why are capital markets important? I think for a few reasons. First and foremost, any government has some specific responsibilities to the country, to citizens. You want to provide infrastructure. You want to keep citizens safe. You want to create jobs. You want the economy to grow. You want to create wealth. Every single one of these pillars tie right back to capital markets. Every one of these pillars tie right back to listings. The government wants to generate revenues also, as an example. One of the things that data will show you is that listed corporates, they pay more taxes. Listed corporates act more responsibly. Listed corporates have a lot more transparency to their operations. They create wealth. And you can see this, across several geographies. Just take one listed company in the sector, take its peer that's not listed, and just try to track what taxes you pay and how you do business. So back to the subject of listings, extremely critical from that perspective. For corporates, why is this necessary? Many times it's very difficult to trace companies from, call it zero to hero, as it were, without support externally. You're a founder of a company, you're shareholders of a company. A lot of times to grow and to scale, you need external capital. Now that capital will typically come from a few sources. And depending on the age of your company, it's everything from very early stage capital all the way to mature capital like listings. And so when I look at a country like Ethiopia, obviously a very mature country, but just on the capital market side isn't quite as active, I think listings become extremely critical. Final point I will make is that back to listings, and just to put this there, as to what we find also across many of the exchanges that we invest in and the business that we do is, today there is a trend that has to be said around delistings. On one hand, as an exchange, you want listings. And what you're seeing is a trend of companies leaving exchanges or companies just not coming at all in the first place. And why is this the case? It's the case because of exactly what I said earlier. The ability for government, for regulators to set up infrastructure that speaks to private capital, that speaks to companies. And so when, for example, the barriers to entry are so high, then corporates can't jump that barrier to come in. When the cost of listing is too high, then they can't come in, or perhaps the benefits. And so one of the things that we're trying to do, for example, again, back to government, is to say, if I'm a listed corporate, can I give you tax incentives? If I'm a listed corporate, perhaps the way you source FX back to the central bank authority, can I support you there? Because, again, it's a sort of network effect that you are trying to create. So I think it's a long-winded answer, but I just thought I'll touch on a few of these areas. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Celestine, very quick question and perhaps a quick response. In terms of balancing the requirements, the objective of investor protection and the requirements that are imposed on companies in terms of disclosure, balancing that with the interest of promoting startups and SMEs to come to public markets, what would you put as one or two pointers as a rule of thumb to follow?
Listen to them, teach them. Public education is very important for them. And hold their hand. Don't be stringent with them. It's not necessary, but they can listen. Because what they are chasing is money. When they get it, they will behave. So I think that's
a nice response.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll make this my final question. Then if you want to add anything else, Temi, I can come back to you. Hannah, what is the vision for the Ethiopian capital markets for the next, let's say, 3, 5 years or 10 years? At least within, while we're still young and are able to support things.
እንግዲህ በሚቀጥሉት ጊዜያት የመጀመሪያው እንግዲህ ተአማኒ የሆነ ገበያ መገንባት ነው።
Well then, the priority in the future is to establish a reliable market. As we have discussed earlier about the constraints we had in the past was to set up reliable markets. We can look at a reliable market in two ways. The investors you mentioned earlier will be private investors or institutional investors that come believing the necessity of market. This will be the one that we will build based on disclosure, as I mentioned it earlier, that build their confidence to disclosure their internal system and even to know their business better, and building this market also plays a role to support the economy at large. Meanwhile, being reliable alone is not enough. It must be vibrant and should have active listing and participation from both issuer side that should come with the confidence of gaining capital from the market, and the investor as well should have the confidence that its interests will be safeguarded. We expect active participation. Apart from that, the private sectors do not come only as issuer or investors, as you know. There are many capital market service providers, and in our legal framework, there are about 15 sectors. They can be brokers, investment banks, custodians, the Sharia advisors, an investment advisor, and this all an industry by itself opened by the private sector. I think in the coming 3 years it will encourage plenty private sectors to come and play their role. The other thing is that the market beyond being active and vibrant should have depth. This could happen with the products and services that you have tested earlier, such as equity market and debt market. Moreover, there will be others like Sharia compliant products and products related to climate finance where we are doing a lot to diversify products. Therefore, the existence of the market being reliable and vibrant, and where various products are offered and everyone participates, this will ultimately bring a visible change in the lives of every Ethiopian, support the economy, create jobs, provide funds to the SMEs. The perception about capital market is that it is for the elite and giant companies. It erroneous because I think capital market is everyone's and it is for all. For instance, according to the legal frameworks, at least there will be more than 50 shareholders. In addition to that, the Ethiopian capital market is dedicated to serve the SMEs. Our vision is to build an inclusive capital market.
እና ሚዲየም ኢንተርፕራይዞችን ሰርቭ ለማድረግ ለዚህ ሁሉንም የሚያካትት የካፒታል ገበያ ለመገንባት ነው እንግዲህ ቪዥን ያለን።
Thank you. Temi, while we're on the same question, how do you measure a successful capital markets? What are one or two KPIs that you would like to see be met when you come back here in 2-3 years' time?
Thank you very much. I would say maybe three things. One is to the point I made earlier, when we look across the continent today, I think Africa, our problems will be solved by ourselves, first and foremost. Especially just when you look at the developments globally. People are getting more insular, more inward-looking. So for us, one of the metrics of success is just a lot more of what I'm seeing today, more sort of call it intertwining, as it were. Capital flowing, both local capital domestically, but also capital across in the continent. So this ability for Ethiopia to follow this path to open up responsibly, a bit more testing of that will be very key. Number two, to the point I made earlier, when you look today across the globe, you look at India is a very classic example. The Indian economy and the Indian capital market is a case study now globally. And I see many similarities with ESX today, where in India you had an exchange for a very long time. And then maybe just about 15 years ago, the government set up another exchange, NSE. Very similar to this, very tech-driven, very integrated market with a lot of leapfrogging that had happened. And today, that economy, that capital market has shot everything through the roofs. Maybe now today, top 3 capital market globally. The economy also is flying. It's creating wealth. It's creating jobs. Corporates can list, can raise money. The government also can do what it needs to do. So I think that's really the target I see for something like ESX. This ability for wealth creation, this ability for growth in the country, in the economy, for the government to be able to finance its resources. And then number 3, finally, again, globally now we speak about what I call triple-digit bottom line. So it's the profits from an economic perspective, it's the social, part of things, and then it's the environment. Just looking forward to an ESX also that has this sort of a lens, right? A responsibility from a social perspective to citizens in Ethiopia, a responsibility, just to do things sustainably around the environment, which also a lot of the capital market products also can encourage, can spur. I think around these 3 areas, I'm looking forward to growth around. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, dear panelists. Thank you.